it can be challenging to deal with an entire other family when you have in-laws. In today's video, I want to talk about something I see as foundational for our relationships with our in-laws and our partners around our in-laws going well, which is to let them be the experts on their own family. Hey everyone, I'm Sonia. Welcome to my channel where I give you tips on relationships, attachment style healing, and all manner of things to help you live your best lives and have the most fulfilling relationships. So today I want to talk about letting your partner be the expert on their own family, and like what I mean by that, and how I don't mean just caving in on everything. I don't mean that there aren't still important discussions to be had, but that is foundational for things to go smoothly, for boundaries around whose relationship is what to be respected, for all of that to happen. So my overall fundamental point here that I want to make is that everyone has their own relationship with everyone else. And I will nuance that a little bit by talking about sort of group dynamics and the way that plays in a little later in the video, but that we want to respect that, for example, your relationship with your mother-in-law is going to be different from your sister-in-law's relationship with your mother-in-law, with your mother-in-law's relationship with your child, right? That everyone still is going to have these differences in those individual relationships. And I want to make an analogy here because I'm also a kidlit writer. When I think of like in YA, young adult fiction, when I'm teaching that, it's when we're looking at dialogue, there's often this point that's made or looked at in your own work that you'll have the voice of the character that comes through in the dialogue and how they talk. And it's always important to double check and see how they talk to different people. So people don't talk, some little verbal things that you say might be consistent with everybody, but there's always going to be differences, slight differences in the tone and the way of speech. If, let's say, a teen is talking to their friend, if they're talking to a parent, if they're talking to a teacher. So it's an important analogy, I think, to think about with regard to relationships in general. That we aren't exactly the same with different people. We have these very unique relationships. And then, of course, each teen also, right, wouldn't speak the same necessarily to their parent as their friend because they have a different relationship with their parent than their friend does. And so similarly, there's all these unique relationships that are playing into these wider family dynamics. Okay, but so why should your partner be the expert? And maybe the first thing I'm going to say makes you think they shouldn't be, which is that, it's important to understand that your partner, yourself too, right? That everyone's somewhat blind to the family dynamics they grew up in because the proverbial fish living in water and doesn't realize the water's there. It's just what feels normal for you, right? That feels normal, that kind of family dynamic, the little habits the family has, all kinds of things about that just are so normalized. It's what you're coming from that you don't necessarily see the nuances to it. You don't necessarily see how it would look to someone else or how it affects someone else. And so that means that you can't just enlighten your partner. So that's really the reason why this connects into a point about why they have to be the expert. Well, first of all, they are, right? They are the expert because, like I just said, you didn't grow up in the circumstances. So in one way, they're blind to how it can be different for someone else, but in the other way, you're blind because you didn't grow up entirely there either. You don't know every experience they had, all the inside stuff. And you can't just enlighten them. It's not here's the real point. It's not about enlightening them, here's what your family's like. That's, I think we often do that and we're trying to say that's not normal, right? Because to us, it wasn't, right? And so it's they're right in a sense that it's normal. It was normal for them, their family. And so you can't just go in and enlighten them, both because they're somewhat blind to it, but also because that's not really appropriate. So what we want to get down here instead isn't that you're enlightening them about something, but rather that you are in the present, you're part of the system too. What is it that you need and want? How is it that you coming into the dynamic, how does that need to either have some boundaries around it, have some needs met. Like how does that need to be expressed? And like, what do you actually need from it? So if you can put the focus, it's really like putting the focus, instead of putting the focus on what you're witnessing and seeing this other dynamic, and putting the focus instead on yourself and how you're playing into that dynamic. And are there things that you do potentially need from other people in communicating, or in, other practical things given that? And I do want to have the caveat here. Like, let's say there's some very abusive type things that happen, verbal abuse or whatever it is. I'm not saying that you cannot bring up that point. I think it's the most helpful to bring it up as like, it made me sad to see, that you're treated that way, or some kind of a way that you're still expressing it, like that you're the witness of it, and kind of not taking that experience away from the other person. But you can absolutely bring that up. It's just, mostly in this particular conversation, I'm talking about things that aren't to the level of abuse. So I want to also, because those can also be difficult in their own way, I really want to bring in how to address those. So again, the main point being twofold: that your partner is their own individual person with their own relationships, and any change in those relationships that they have with their family or with individual family members has to come from them. And then on the other side of things, whatever it is that you're needing, or however the dynamic's going, if it's something that's disturbing you, needs to get brought up in the context of yourself, right? So not blurring what your partner's relationship is with their family with how the dynamic is that you're wanting to change, that has to do with when you're in the picture. And I think this is really important, because it's important when we have sort of the mental boundaries that we aren't controlling other people in that way, controlling their relationships, or trying to control their transformation or change. And respecting that can go a long way towards actually resolving, then sort of more pinpointing and resolving what the actual issue is that can be changed to help you. Okay, so I promised I would go a little away from these individual dynamics, because I've mainly been talking about individual relationships that your partner has with each person and that you have with each person. And I've kind of mentioned it as a family too, but let's talk about the fact that there really are relationships at these sort of bigger levels of more than two people. So for example, there's also the relationship that you as a couple have to, let's say, your in-laws, or you as a nuclear family, let's say you have kids, have to your in-laws as well. So that I would call that a separate relationship. So just looking at the couple level for a moment here, your partner has a relationship with, let's say, their father, you have a relationship with their father, and then you as a couple have a relationship with your father, right? Because that could look like where you sometimes when you're doing things together and scheduling, for example, that's you as a couple interacting with the father. Or, you can also look at the bigger family as its own unit too. So you could say the nuclear family that your partner grew up in can be a unit. So you could also say you as a couple and the family dynamics and all that system that interacts, like you have a relationship to that whole system as well, both as a couple and individually. I hope that all makes sense. I almost need a chart here or a graph here or something to show you. So why it's important is that it again distinguishes like what the issue is. So in the case where it's like you as a unit doing something and them as a unit doing something in your scheduling, knowing that that's the relationship level you're at, I think will make it clear that, for example, in that case, both of what you need is coming into you as a couple. And then, what is coming out from emerging, let's say it's scheduling, and they as a unit have something scheduled, and let's make it a very clear example here. So let's say you're going to have a weekend dinner, and you're supposed to go over to the original nuclear family's house for that dinner. And so let's say that they amongst themselves, let's say there's a sibling who isn't married and the parents, your in-laws, and let's say they've already figured out a time that they're presenting, and you are hoping to counter for a particular time based on your schedules as well. because there's some openness to it shifting. Let's say it's not that they are the host, so they get to set the time, but let's say that they have some flexibility. So you then as a couple are first figuring out what you're not going to individually, right? So this is your relationship as a couple to them as a family. So you are going to first as a couple figure out what it is that works for the two of you together. What are the times that both of you can do together? And then that's what you decide for going over there, assuming you're going together. Like if you have to make a decision and only one person goes, well, then that becomes their individual relationship and what they can do in the schedule. So that's just a very practical example of how that looks. So in that case, it's not about the individual relationship as much as like what you can do as a couple, and then you are negotiating that with them as a family. And then, so let's say there's an example of something that's a communication issue where you didn't like something that was said by, let's say, one of the family members. Let's say it was a sister-in-law. So it doesn't mean you can't ever bring your partner into the discussion. Like if they communicate really well with their sister, maybe they are the one who could tell them something. I mean, it's always ideal if you can communicate directly with an individual about something, but there's truth also to the fact that sometimes if someone's close to someone or they feel like they're good at talking with them, that they could help sort of bring you together and do a little bit of like peacemaking or whatever you want to call it. Clarifying, that kind of thing. They could serve as a mediator. That's really the word I'm looking for, that they could serve as a mediator. But what's important there is to keep respecting that individual relationship, right? So let's say you didn't like something your sister-in-law said, and your husband is very close to their sister, and so you do want them to serve as a mediator. What's important is to keep that their relationship is separate, to keep that respected. So you are not going to hopefully succumb to that impulse where you're trying to get them on your side. We're talking about non-abusive level here. But you're going to enlist their help in communicating for you. And so it doesn't mean that it isn't a problem and that you don't need to fix it and that you can't try to fix it, but not having it be about your husband's relationship with their sister, other than that they can serve as a good mediator and that they care about both of you, right? That they're hopefully caring about that you want to have this resolved and trying to help you with that. So I hope that's clear on what I mean about that, like how really those individual relationships do need to be respected to make things go the best and to keep things from being all messy. I think so many times all these dynamics go messy, and a lot of it is because of not understanding or respecting all these both all the individual relationships and all these levels of relationships, and sort of like at what level or in what interaction is the issue coming from, or whether it's a simple thing like just no one cares, no one's having any feelings about it at all, like a scheduling thing, although that can sometimes lead to feelings, or whether it's something that has a bit more feeling to it or feels like more of an issue. To really understand like those different sort of layers and levels is really important. And of course, occasionally things can cross levels, but trying to get those distinguished as possible is important too. And pulling it back to that word expert about their family here, it's, I guess I've mainly been talking about that in the sense of they're experts on their own individual relationships, right, with their family. They're both their background with their family and their individual relationships with their family, just as you are the expert on your own interaction, even with their individual family members. And so I think the reason I'm having to say this is because those boundaries tend to be crossed. They tend to get all muddled, like individual relationships, the couple relationship to the other dynamic, like all of that tends to get really muddled. And instead, like it's beautifully come to in that final example, when your partner is the expert on the family, it can instead sometimes be a wonderful thing where they can not be having to be on your side, but other than, like I said, it doesn't mean that they're not caring about what your experience is and trying to help you. But instead of it being about them being on your side, it can be about them being able to perhaps mediate, or perhaps because they're the expert on their family, really help things to go smoothly and to go better. And of course that, will apply mainly in situations where someone has a fairly healthy dynamic with their family, but it can even be nuanced, right? So someone might not be able to be the mediator for their family as a whole because they had a really unhealthy family dynamic, but they might be able to be with their aunt or like some particular person where they are able to be the mediator. So hopefully that helps you to see some of these dynamics and how they play out, and how you keeping that perspective of your partner as the expert on their family, as someone whose relationships with them should be respected. Hopefully that can help and go a long way towards unraveling some issues that come up, unraveling some communication issues, that miscommunication that sometimes comes up, and to have just overall better experience in dealing with when we have people who come from completely different family dynamics coming together and then also still interacting with those families. Let me know if you have any questions below. If you'd like more of this kind of content on this kind of issue, please let me know. And I am open to one-on-one coaching now, so if you are interested in that, check out the description box below, or perhaps get on my newsletter.